Thank you. I really do thank you for the opportunity to speak here. As you mentioned, I'm an addiction psychiatrist at Rutgers University in the United States. So that you don't have to take pictures or copy this down, you can contact me. I can send it to you. If you have the app for this, just send me a note and I will see that you get it quickly. Religions write about spiritual awakening, conversion, rebirth, salvation, enlightenment, God consciousness, opening to a higher power, essence, presence, the Tao or the way, Dharma, Bodhicitta, Prajna, awareness, Jewish Vaikut, Zen Kensho, Sikh Mukti, and Sufi Nafsil Mutmainna and Hakika. Religions speak of it with words of connection, purpose, wholeness, beliefs, values, love, faith, wisdom, joy, truth, mystical, transcendence, forgiveness, and even sexuality. And words related to mental health, suffering, shame, guilt, self-esteem, ethics, healing, worth, dignity, honesty, reason, creativity, empathy, compassion, courage, gratitude, serenity, and happiness. William James, an American psychologist, characterizes the life of religion with it consists of the belief that there is an unseen order and that our supreme good lies in harmoniously adjusting ourselves thereto. This belief and this adjustment are the religious attitude in the soul. And he speaks of it as ineffable, being beyond words, noetic, having revelatory impact, transient, and passive. We have explored this unseen order from a psychological perspective for 20 years and identified an order that we have entitled a framework of spirituality that connects all of these ideas mentioned in a unified theory of religious experience and spiritual experience that unites science, religion, and is clinically useful in mental health. This is the first international presentation of this work. There are 3 parts. First, I'll describe the process to open spiritual experience even without having epilepsy. Second, there will be a speculative explanation for evolutionarily why can we have spiritual experience. And third, there'll be a proposed description of the brain process that we think is occurring. If you can get one concept out of my talk, it is that for all spiritual, religious, and mental health work that you do, experiences of worth and dignity, as we will define it, are key to opening a powerful spiritual core within us that is a source of healing and happiness. We begin with the simple psychological foundation of thoughts, feelings, and actions of cognitive behavior theory. It grounds our framework. We expand it to beliefs, values, and habits in discussions related to spirituality. However, these discussions are often inadequate, as usual usage of each of these terms includes only 2 of these 3 domains. For instance, beliefs may focus on emotionally laden thoughts, often disconnected from action, as seen in hypocrisy, a stated belief in the equality of all people, all God's children are good, with actions showing inequality or discrimination. Values are thoughtful behaviors that are egocentric with neutral emotional experience until they are challenged, which at that time they become very powerful. A person values, for instance, taking care of others before themselves, until it is pointed out how this has led to financial or emotional losses, and anger and sorrow arise. And habits, of course, are emotionally driven behaviors disconnected from thought, especially seen with harmful habits such as addictions and self-destructive behaviors. Integration of these 3 domains into the domain of being brings us into ontological experience beyond the usual psychological realm we live in, the study of being. In entering this, we work with attitudes as an integrated experience of thoughts, feelings, and actions. An attitude of pessimism may include a thought of life never works out, a feeling of discouragement or hopelessness, and an action of withdrawal or avoidance. We operationalized experiences of worth and dignity and serendipitously discovered how they are experiences of being, also integrating all three domains of thinking, feeling, and doing. This is what makes CBT and other psychological theories of spirituality different than what we are presenting. And we begin with the definition of worth as we look at it as the experience of self-worth. That quality of a person or thing that lends importance, value, merit, and that is measurable by the esteem in which the person or thing is held. Note that what we are looking at is a quality of experience, which is what makes spirituality ineffable, but real. Try to put the quality of soft into words. Self-worth in our framework is composed of self-confidence in the domain of thinking, self-esteem in the domain of feeling, and self-competence or self-efficacy in the domain of doing. Research actually shows that there's a developmental progression from self-competence and efficacy at age 1 to 2, self-esteem at 3 to 4, self-confidence 5 to 8, and integrated as self-worth at age 8 to 10. And what we found is we recognize shame, not just as an emotion, but as an ontological reaction of being unworthy with a profound impact on all of being. Dignity in our work is not used as a noun, as something we have, but as an expression of being, requiring integration of all three domains. The definition, let me back up. I have to back up. The definition of dignity being the quality of being worthy of esteem or honor. Again, it is a quality that we are working with, which makes spiritual experience ineffable. And what we uniquely honor in being human in the domain of thinking is reason, beginning with our ability to make conscious choices, and with experience progressing to wisdom. In the domain of feeling, in the domain of feeling, we honor compassion, expressed uniquely from our incredible capacity for empathy due to language and maybe from the previous speaker, mirror neurons, and expanding to caring and expanding to justice socially. The domain of doing honors courage in its fundamental form being honesty with oneself and others, and expands socially to generosity. All of this is important because empowering worth and dignity leads to a spontaneous opening into new awareness of an imminent spiritual experience. What do we mean in our work by spirituality? We've used this definition. The quality, again, a quality of the relationship with whomever or whatever is most important or supreme in life. Any of you that heard some of the other presentations, the definition of yoga being a connection and a relationship actually makes this work a yoga. Spiritual experience may be ineffable, but a quality of experience is absolutely real. In order to identify this, we had identified 5 characteristics that qualified to denote when someone may be in a spiritual experience, including connectedness, aliveness and a vitality that was not there beforehand, a wholeness or a sense of integrity, an emotional response of peace or serenity, but maybe awe or joy, depending on the circumstances, and there was usually a meaning or purpose present. Opening to this awareness could be mild or gradual, like an insight, or very dramatic, like a conversion experience, depending on a person's attitude about spirituality and personal experiences of worth and dignity. We identified 3 main keys that open to spirituality, one in each domain. In the domain of feeling, of course, the key is open-heartedness, open to all feelings. Let me just, Open-heartedness, open to all feelings without judgment. In the domain of thinking, the key is open-mindedness, of course, open to all thoughts and hypotheses without judgment. With this key, this is what makes entrance into spiritual experience difficult. Anyone that demands, I can't understand this, so it must not be true, will get stuck. They cannot enter the spiritual opening. What if there is knowledge that cannot be understood until it is experienced? Reason must be suspended, and by intuition, people open themselves to the mystical part of this experience, with mysticism being defined as knowledge through intuition, and intuition being defined as knowledge without conscious use of reasoning. And finally, in the domain of doing, the key is open-handedness, opening to reaching out to get or to receive help without judgment of consequence. Blocks to each of these openings come from life experiences of being open-hearted, open-minded, and open-handed, and being rejected, ignored, abandoned, humiliated, and generally hurt. Trauma, including adverse childhood experiences, damages worth and dignity. A child is sexually assaulted and responds with a feeling of guilt or failure, or even being broken, where all domains of self-worth, self-confidence, self-esteem, and self-competence, and all domains of dignity, making choices from reason, compassion for self and others, and courage are severely damaged. The openness to spirituality also opens experiences of what we call creative forces or openings. And we call these creative forces because the experience of them is forceful. When love, as a creative force, appears in the group that we are working with, it is truly like the Holy Spirit descending. And this is not love as a feeling, or love as a commitment, like I love you. This is the opening to the love that is the Greek agape, the love of God, the divine, love of life, love of self. It opens also to truth as a creative force, but not truth like right or wrong or good or bad, but as Mahatma Gandhi talked about the satyagraha, the truth force that is a visceral, a gut recognition within us when worth and dignity are damaged. And finally, the creative force of faith, but not as a belief. Faith as an action to take that leap across the chasm rounds us out to an intense, thrilling spiritual opening. Now, let me propose why this exists and why we can have such experience. Let's go back to evolution. Imagine, go back 100,000 to 1,000,000 years ago. Pre-Homo, hominids, pre-language, and put yourself in what we call a bottleneck, where up to 90% of humanity may have died, according to genetic research. You are in a single group, 50 to 100 hominids with severe survival pressures from weather, predators, disease, accident. However, survival is not just about survival of the fittest individual. It is also about survival of the group. It is proposed, conjectured, that members in that small group had defined roles like in a beehive. Jonathan Haidt described this, and that they were all connected. You know, when you hurt a bee, they all come after you. It is suspected that we may have had that kind of connection, and they were alive with a full energy in their short lives, with a sense of wholeness, and a serenity and a peace, because there was no conflict. You did not argue with the queen bee that you didn't want to be a worker bee. And there was a built-in purpose. What does that mean? If we had that beehive, the characteristics that I just described basically were spirituality. That what is proposed is that it was bred in, that there was an all for one, a one for all, and wired in as the characteristics of spiritual experience. How can we imagine this possible? There are breeders. There's an example. If you breed hens for the number of eggs that you produce, you breed for aggression, and the aggression can become cannibalistic. A breeder took a group of hens in small hen houses and bred them just for the total group of eggs. Within 3 generations, aggression plummeted. Within 6 generations, the death rate went from 67 to 8%, and the eggs per hen from 91 to 237. Here's evidence of breeding in an all for one and a one for all. And while this was wired in socially as the group, what was wired in personally was our capacity for having experiences of worth and dignity. Because what would happen if a hominid did not have self-worth? If they didn't have the capacity to function, if they did not have the self-esteem, they would be shunned. If they did not have the self-confidence, they would not have been able to do what they did. If the group did not make choices from reason, if the group did not have compassion for each other, if the group did not have courage, it would not have survived. We speculate that at some point, language and global dispersion led to the loss. Here we have the spiritual core. Language and global dispersion left to a loss of this connection. And what we believe happens is that when we open worth and dignity again, we open ourselves to a hidden spiritual core. Now let me talk about, I've still got 3 minutes, I think. Brain theory. Paul MacLean talked about the triune brain, that there are 3 types of brain function. A reptilian part, a mammalian part, the mammalian part being being emotions, memories, and decisions, and the cortical human part being language and reason. There are theories that we basically have a 2-processing brain. There's pretty good support for this, and that's what we think is going on. There is a mammalian part that is faster, associative, and more primitive, and a cortical part that is slower and logical and sequential, and the primitive part defaults to the cortical part. And here's what happens. I'll give you an example. Trauma occurs. The limbic brain reacts fast, makes a decision. I am a failure. I am broken. Cortex has no awareness of this decision. The limbic decisions control actions based on I am a failure, and that's how that person lives their life, with the cortex having no awareness of this. How does the cortex function? It tries to adapt by using things, drugs, feelings, behaviors, power, and things of distraction. Within clinical applications, here's how we apply it clinically, is that memories will arise. Well, actually, let me see if I can. We bring memories back to consciousness. What happens immediately is the conscious brain will react, will be judgmental, and will suppress it. And only with a mindful awareness technique can we help to recall those feelings and memories without the judgment. When there is acceptance of who we are, where we came from, what we felt, what was done to us, or what we did, with compassion and forgiveness, we open a level of gratitude, and that spiritual core opens up again. Okay. So, in conclusion, we postulate this as an immanent spiritual core that has powers of healing because it is without the suffering attachment to memories. It is related to the mystical core that is present in most world religious traditions and the spiritual awakenings that many traditions, many things in Alcoholics Anonymous will talk about, and we are proposing this framework of spirituality as part of the unseen order, bringing science, spirituality, religion, and mental health and wellness to human happiness. Thank you very much.